live here. If you can see me or hear me, say so. Let's see. Yes, I think we are, in fact, live. And you are now in Inception. Let's get that out of the way. Okay, great. Awesome. It's working. Great. Okay. Well, hello, and let's get this adjusted. Turn off my volume so I can't hear myself. Hello, and welcome to Janus Motorcycles Ramblestream with me, Richard Worsham. This evening we've made some adjustments, and I am now hardwired into the internet, so we shouldn't have any of the same issues we had before with the stream dropping right in the middle. And we are also, for the first time, streaming to YouTube and Facebook at the same time. And supposedly comments that come in will be from both, but maybe if you're on YouTube, you probably will only see comments in the YouTube comment box from YouTube, and the same with Facebook. But I'm hoping that the comment little thread here that's up in the window, I can't point it out, but it's up there in the window above me, like right here. Will be those comments combined. We will see. Right, so let's see. We got some folks on already. Jacob says, hey, it's working. Yeah, let's hope it stays working. Confed Yank, howdy, how's it going? And of course, Gary. Hey, Gary. Hope you've gotten some good riding in this weekend. It's been lovely. I have. Jeep Man Dan, hello there, watching from the in-laws' house. Yay. All right. Hello from Kalamazoo. We got a lot of Michiganders. Confed Yank. I'm not sure where you are located. Posted up there. So, as always, if you're on, please let us know who you are, where you're from, what you're drinking. Tonight, I'm just drinking water, but let me know what you're drinking. And oh, there's Grant. Hey, Grant. Confed Yank's North Carolina. Great. All right. I'm a little bit rushed today because we actually went on a bicycle ride, family and I, and it was a long ride, and I just got in. So, Gary's drinking ice water tonight. It's hot there. Yeah, me too. Did a long bike ride and to get ice cream, and now I'm thirsty. Confed Yank says, although some buddies showing me where I can find some cheap used Janus, lol. Great. Craig Hamburger, I think that's a very new owner, if I remember correctly. Hello, everyone from Tennessee. Not drinking Bud Light. Oh, okay, great. Okay. Anyway, I haven't had much time, so I'll just randomly pick a little something to read before we get started. And we'll go from there. Well, that's a good one. There we go. Got a good one. So as always, I always get started with a little bit of poetry, so we'll get that out of the way first. This one's by William Blake, who's one of my absolute favorites, writing in the 18th century. This one's called London, and it's a lovely poem. I wander through each chartered street, near where the chartered Thames does flow, and mark in very face I meet, marks of weakness, marks of woe. In every cry of every man, in every infant's cry of fear, in every voice, in every ban, the mind-forged manacles I hear. How the chimney sweepers cry, every blackening church appalls, and the hapless soldier's sigh runs in bled down palace walls. But most through midnight streets I hear how the youthful harlot's curse blasts the newborn infant's tear and blights with plagues the marriage hearse. That's a dark and funny one. All right. So last week, or no, it was 2 weeks ago, because I hadn't gotten the internet figured out, we were going to do this little presentation I gave on Onshape, and it's our design software in Boston, and it got cut off midstream, literally. And I'm so rushed, I haven't gotten all my props together, but we will let's just wing it here, and I hope you all find this interesting. I have not practiced this since I gave it, and so it'll be kind of rambling, as is the way of these things, and so forgive me if I have to pause and remember where I am, but I hope we can kind of make this a little more informal. As always, stop, ask questions, ramble a bit, and learn a little bit about this interesting moment in our history early on with Janus motorcycles, where we had a big issue that we had to fix. So it's taken me a while to be able to even talk about this. I think I said that last time. We got some, hey everyone, this is Craig, says, hey everyone from Tennessee. No, that's what he said already. Grant says, letting my IPA from GBCO settle before I have some bourbon. GBCO is Goshen Brewing Company. It's our local brewery. G-Man Dan says, Andy's wife makes him ride in the back seat. Oh, that's, wife is driving from Michigan to Illinois so I can watch from the car. Awesome. And happy Father's Day, everyone. Yes, indeed. Happy Father's Day to everyone, whether you are a father, a son, a daughter, or a mother. Or I guess you have to be one of the above, but yeah. Okay, let's get started. So again, this is a presentation that I gave at the PTC LiveWorx conference in Boston about a month ago, maybe a little more. Today's the 18th, almost a month ago, I guess. And it was PTC is the parent company of Onshape, which is our design software. It is a cloud-based CAD, 3D CAD program, primarily designed for mechanical engineering and product design. It's pretty powerful. It's a small. It was much smaller when we started using it. Much more affordable than some of the other options like SolidWorks, which is kind of the, I guess you could say, industry standard. There's PTC also does own Creo, which is another major platform, but Onshape kind of fits this interesting niche in the design market that really matches with what we do here at Janus, and it allows us to do things that we wouldn't be able to do otherwise. So let's get started. So I basically start off the talk by asking, have you been there? By a show of hands, how many of you all, and we'll just ask you all too, how many of you all have been face to face with let's just say a catastrophic situation to which you really had no idea how you were going to address it or resolve it or get past it? And of course, in the room, there were plenty of people that raised their hands. I don't know if any of you all have. I've been there at least once, but I'd like to set the stage for this time that it happened. This is us in, I think this would have been first weekend in October of 2016. So right away there, Janus was founded in 2011. We would have been about 5 years old at this point. And you'd think, well, that's pretty far into the journey of Janus, where you weren't brand new. And that's true, but we were, you have to keep in mind, we had only been manufacturing 50cc bikes, and we had just launched the 250 line at that point. So in looking back at it now, we kind of think about ourselves as having two foundings or two starts at least, because what we were doing early on with the 50 cc's was very different than what we do now with the 250 and 450 line. We were essentially two people in a garage bay building a bike, not paying ourselves, and then basically letting the profit off of that previous bike roll into making the next bike. And if, yes, we did. We set we designed the Halcyon, the kind of iconic DNA of Janus, and we set a lot of things there early on, but it was not really a company, a production company like it is now. It wasn't until 2014 or 15 when Grant and Jordan joined the team. We started hiring more employees and created the company that really is Janus. So this is really early, let's just say that, in the company history. But we were at Barber, which, if you're not familiar, is just outside of Birmingham. It's a magnificent motorcycle complex. It's like a motorcycle heaven. They have a wonderful racetrack. They have, if you can see in this slide up here, they have there's the track in the background. They have a museum, which is that big building. The museum, since we were there last, has just had a huge expansion. They have an advanced design center, and it's probably one of the best motorcycle museums in the world, if not definitely one. I mean, it's certainly if you're into motorcycles here in the States, you got to go visit. They have them stacked up, hundreds of them over your head. It's really incredible. I just remember standing there looking at a Brough Superior, which is an incredible motorcycle that inspired a lot of what we do, and in the museum, looking through the window down onto the racetrack, and a Britain V1000, this incredibly rare motorcycle, was pulling a wheelie down the racetrack, down the straightaway. So a bunch of just absolutely incredible things, and I remember kind of pinching myself and thinking, is this really happening? We were there. We were set up with our tents. You can see right here with our flags and tents and models, motorcycle models all ready to go. And I received a phone call. I was manning the booth at the time, and the phone call was a Janus customer. And what he told me was kind of the last thing that I wanted to hear, not just that weekend, but at all, as a motorcycle designer and founder of Janus Motorcycles. What he told me was that he was riding his 50. So this would have been the first model we had come out with. At this point, we probably had almost all of the 50s were done, were built at this point. So they were all produced. And we were starting on the 250. And he told me that he was riding along. I think he was going through an intersection, and all of a sudden the bike just, as he described it, went limp. Lost all responsiveness. Something was definitely wrong. He pulls over to the side of the road, stops the bike, and thinks, maybe I can, just take a look at it and see what's wrong. And this is one of those times when sometimes you can't really tell by just looking at the bike what's going on. Well, he could tell, because what had happened was the frame, the chassis, had snapped in half. So not a great thing to have happen. I'll get into more details on how and why it had snapped in half, but luckily he was perfectly okay. The way that it snapped was not, you could still ride the bike, but it was not safe. So that happened, and I turn around, and I'm telling everybody else about this, and I mean, basically what's going through my head is, well, it's been a fun run with you all. I've had a really good time, but I don't know what we're gonna do. This is not good, and we were all really, really stumped by this. This extremely. It's just the last thing you want to have happen, and it makes you wonder what else could go wrong. So, let me look at my notes here, because I don't remember what I'm supposed to say here. So anyway, over the next 20 minutes, which may be a little longer for you all, I'm really excited to dig into how a small company like Janus Motorcycles confronted this kind of disastrous situation, catastrophic event, and overcame it through the use of a more advanced design software called Onshape, and how this the software really worked well for a small company. Not only, I mean, at this point we were, a handful of employees, but how it's grown with us over the years to where we are now, and how we are still excited to use it for many years to come. So let's dig in a little more. So a little bit of background, and some of you all, as Janus owners or enthusiasts, may already know this, but I am a traditionalist, and the way we do things at Janus Motorcycles is very traditional. There's a lot of reasons behind that, but one of them is that my training is in traditional and classical architecture. So the reason I actually moved out here to Indiana was to go to Notre Dame, which is about 40 minutes west of us here in Goshen, and that's how I found Goshen. It's how I met my wife. It's how I met my co-founder, and everything really sprung from that. But the reason I went to Notre Dame was not because it was because I wanted to necessarily just go to an architecture school. It was because that specific architecture school had the program that I was interested in, and really it had the teacher that I wanted to study under, who's a guy that my father studied under, and who's been extremely inspirational to me. And we were trained in we weren't just trained in how to design. Well, let me say a word about what traditional and classical architecture is. I'm not getting too sidetracked here, but classical architecture is basically, it's the architecture that would have been built. Traditional and classical architecture refers to the architecture that was built prior to the 1920s. So it's not modernist architecture. We won't get into a debate about modern versus traditional, but that's what classical would be the best of that. It's the civic architecture. It's the big buildings, the important structures in a city. And oftentimes people say it has columns on it. Well, it doesn't necessarily have to have columns on it, but it is an example of the best. Basically, that's what classical means, and that's why we call our bikes classically styled, because they are directed toward the best, and they're looking at examples of the best in the past, which is what we were trained to do at Notre Dame when we were designing buildings. We were encouraged to not just do something different for the sake of doing it differently, but to participate in a tradition that gives us a touchstone to figure out the best way of doing things. So if you look back at, let's look at a courthouse, for example, or a market building. There are really good examples for thousands of years prior to us about how those work really well, for example, and how they meet what we need as human beings. So rather than just kind of starting blank slate, tabula rasa, do something funky, you can look at those and it'll teach you how to, it'll show you a model, an example of how to make it really successful. And then you can play with that to create a new building, in this case, or in our case, motorcycle, that answers the requirements of our time and our place in the world. That's a really simple description of it, but maybe it gives you a basic idea. But not only were we trained to design buildings that looked like classical and traditional buildings, but we were trained to do so using traditional design techniques. So in that case, as you see up here on the screen, that would be hand drafting. That's a parallel bar, lead holder, triangles, drawing everything by hand. And we did presentation drawings with watercolor renderings. Everything was done by hand. So when we started Janus Motorcycles, that was the way that we did it, because that's all I knew how to do. So I basically started. We would draw everything at a basically 1-to-1 scale, and then we would build it off that. I don't need to go into too much detail about Janus Motorcycles with you all, because you know what we do here, but we're basically trying to do that same thing that classical and traditional architecture did with motorcycles, which is to recover how do I say this? Is to recover a way of making motorcycles that actually answers what we want as human beings, not what we and not doesn't tell us that we need all these extra features, or that it needs to just look different because different is better. That's one way of looking at it, at least. So let's move on. Let me pause here real quick and just look at these comments. Dan is correct. Confed Yank. It's in Leeds, Alabama. That's Craig Hamburger. Yeah, that's Birmingham. That's where the barber is. And like a mission project start date and bills paying company start date. I'm not sure what that means. Maybe with the starting point of the company. The only thing I know about Bruff Superior is it's from Anime Kino's Journey. Oh, I don't know anything about that. Hello everyone from Eric Fritz. And then Confetti says, I have seen columns in both classic and modern, and certainly varies in different buildings I've seen. Yep, it's true. It's true. One of these days we'll do a little actual presentation on architecture, but I don't want to get too sidetracked. Okay, anyway, moving on. Here's a 50cc. This is the bike that this problem happened with. And this was largely, I guess we can attribute this to the way that we did our design was we basically would build the prototype. We would design, how do I say this? Everything was very intuitive. We would just kind of like, I would draw something at 1:1. We would build it from scratch on the shop floor, and back on the floor, I mean, we would sometimes hold up the print and then line up the components and then have them all welded together. And it was, we did not do any stress testing. We used rule of thumb design, and we weren't able to analyze it. And it was also the design wasn't very repeatable because we couldn't. The tooling was basically built around the first version. So we would make a prototype, we would build the tooling around that, and then the next parts would come out of that tooling. So it resulted in, they worked, but it wasn't scalable and it wasn't repeatable. So if you ever wanted to replace a component, it was very difficult to do. Now with our tooling, well, we'll get to that, but our tooling, we can make a new piece of tooling like that, or make a second set of tooling to expand production. So yeah, but anyway, on this chassis here, let's just take a look. I don't know if you can see my my mouse. I doubt you can, but if you look at the motorcycle, right where the steering head is, which is if you're on a bicycle or on your motorcycle, and the point around which the handlebars turn, that's the steering head. So it's in this case, the 50cc had telescopic forks. It's right ahead of the fuel tank. If you look below that, right behind where that little radiator is, there's a gusset, and we put that gusset in to strengthen the frame. But what we didn't realize is that we were creating something that's called a stress riser. And a stress riser is in like a tubular space frame like this. You weld everything together, and the goal is to have all the stresses be distributed over the entire assembly, so that and it's internally rigid, but that all the stresses are even. For obvious reasons, what happens with a stress riser is you have a high concentration of stresses in a small area of that assembly, and that's exactly what we created by putting this little gusset in below the steering head, which was there to strengthen the frame. We thought we were adding strength. It actually added too much rigidity, so that all the stresses were concentrated. And I think it was about at the 1,500 mile mark that the frame a crack would propagate, and then it would work its way through the frame and crack, and both sides would crack. And it was a dark time because it's just the last thing you want to have happen. So what we ended up doing was contracting with a young engineer from Canada named Chris, and Chris had access to a program called SolidWorks. which is the best known kind of design, 3D design software, like I mentioned earlier. And we decided that we needed to model the frame and then analyze what had caused this. Where was this stress riser? What was causing it? And so he did that. He modeled the frame, did a full model of it, and then we ran it through simulation software. So this is called finite element analysis, or FEA. And basically what that is it's a way of analyzing a assembly for stress. We can get into the details of it, but it's you basically put this fine mesh over the entire vehicle, and you just run a whole lot of small mathematical problems on each one of those little pieces of mesh. So this could be done manually, but it's just because it's there's so many. It could be done, but before FEA it would have been very hard to do because of how many little equations there are to complete, because the mesh has to be very small. So FEA, he ran the problem, and right away you could see exactly where the stress riser was exactly at the point where the frame had broken. So that, in that sense, it was a good sign at that point that we knew that we had figured out why it was happening, and the next thing was to figure out how we were going to fix it. And not only did, at this point we were launching our 250 line. So at this point we had built 2 250 chassis, and they had this problem. They hadn't broken yet, but we knew that it was going to happen because we had put this stress riser in the chassis. So we needed to come up with a fix for the future 250s that no future bike would have a problem. But we also had about 43 total Halcyon 50s out in the wild. And we had to figure out a way to fix every single one of those without, bringing the bike back and completely putting a new frame on it. We would have gone out of business. It was just the cost of that would have been astronomical. So we came up with was a system where we put basically a metal slug into the chassis, and I actually have one here. Here's one of the. This is the fix. And as you can, I don't know if you can see on it, it has a ridge here, and that was for on the 50cc bikes. They had a electro welded tube. All of our new frames use DOM, which does not have any seam on it. It's very concentric, but these had this seam, so we had to line that seam up to fit it into the chassis. And basically what we did was we would go into that part of the chassis right behind the airbox. Sorry, not airbox. Right behind the radiator. We would chop out a 1-inch section of the frame, insert this, and then we would do spot welds down the side, and then weld all the way around, and then clean it all up, paint it, and reinstall everything on there. And we had to do this on site because, well, we'll get to that. Here we go. So I think basically what we ended up having to do was go through a full NHTSA recall. We didn't have to, but we decided that this was an opportunity for us to do it right, figure out what the process was, because recalls do happen. I think a sign of a company being healthy and on top of what it's doing is that it does issue recalls. We haven't had to issue any since this, but I would not see a recall as a sign of a company not making good products. I mean, what do they say? The Ford Focus is the most recalled vehicle in history. You probably don't want that to have happened to you, but having some recalls shows that you're on top of things, you're listening to the customer, and that this thing needs to be addressed. So we did that. We filed that. It basically meant we sent it a letter. We filed it with the government, with the NHTSA. We sent a letter to every single customer saying, don't ride your bike. This is what's going on. This is how long it's going to, this is the issue. This is how we're going to fix it. And this is how long it's going to take us. And what we ended up doing was kitting out our little Janus trailer at the time. This was our little trailer, and putting a generator, welder, and all the tools that we needed to do the fix. And we rented an RV. So here's my wife and our 3 girls. And I think at this point we were in we were in Painted Rocks Desert. We were down in the Southwest. But we made a giant loop across America fixing many of these 50cc bikes. We would show up at the owner's house, we'd schedule it all in advance, say, hello, we're here to fix your bike. And then it took, by the time I had really dialed it in, I could get it done in, I think it was 2.5 hours from start to finish. But it was a lot of fun. We ended up having Christmas in Joshua Tree, and we ended up spending a lot less money than we could have if we hadn't figured out all this solution and been creative with it. But as I was going around driving across the country doing this, the thought that was going through my head was, what are we going to do to prevent this from ever happening again? I do not ever want to have this kind of catastrophic situation happen. Take one more minute here and look at some more comments. When you were saying about like 2 start dates for Janus. Oh, okay. Yes, I see what you're saying. Going back to that previous comment, like a mission project start date and bills paying company start date. Yeah, you could say that. Craig Hamburger, what's next for Janus? What's on the drawing board for the future? Lots of updates and upgrades for your motorcycles. That's the number one thing right now is we're going to be focusing on the 250 and the 450 and coming out with a lot of updates and options for those more. And the goal will be to make sure all those are retrofittable to previous bikes. We have a lot of cool projects up our sleeve right now. So stay tuned for those. I like this idea of auctioning off architect drawing of a Janus done by Richard. Nice. Hi, everyone. Oh, Charles says, hi, everyone. Came in a little late, about 5 minutes ago. Nice Isle of Man flag. Yes. Isle of Man. Confetti Yank says, I rather a company do recalls than deny their mistakes. 100%. That's my take on it as well. Speaking as I have Chevy burst into flames on me, oh no, and covering recalls and providing fixes for the motorcycles is review I heard of y'all. Yep. Did you stop production of the 250 frames until the design was changed? Yes. Well, we really hadn't started. We had 2 prototypes. We had Halcyon 000 and Phoenix 000, and we hadn't done any more at that point. Everything was very slow. I mean, we'd build one frame, and it would take us months to come out with the next prototype. Everything was very, very slow in those days. Still isn't super fast, but yeah. So it was just a major concern. We're like, okay, we've got these new frames. I thought we were going to be able to base these off of the previous versions without any trouble, but now we need to redesign everything. So anyway, here we are. I'm wondering, what are we going to do to make sure this never happens again? But I mean, it's a great question. Like, did we have to stop production? No, we didn't. But it made us stop development until we figured out the solution. I mentioned Chris, the engineer, being able to study the frame. We were confident that because the stress riser showed up so clearly in his FEA that there were no other ones. We looked throughout the whole chassis. We modeled everything, and we couldn't find any other places where there could be an issue. So we were confident that we had solved at least the fatigue stress failure aspect of the design. But it just basically was a huge red flag for us that we need to be keeping an eye on all this stuff. We need to know in advance. We need to have better control of our designs. We need to have, at this point, we were also really running into issues with our documentation wasn't adequate for our vendors. And so we knew we needed to get better design. I was using I should mention I was using 2D CAD, like architectural Autodesk CAD, but it just is not designed for, obviously, for motorcycles. So we knew we needed to move on. And that's exactly what we did. We decided to, well, I was asking around. Everyone, you all already know that Janus is located right in downtown Goshen. We're right behind the coffee shop, the record store, and the theater is behind us. And I was over in the coffee shop hanging out, getting a different kind of brew, a coffee. And I ran into a guy named Al, I just saw him yesterday, actually. We had a discovery day here, and saw Al over there. But Al is a retired engineer. I think he's like a hydraulic engineer. I can't remember what kind of engineering he does, but he was working on a hydroelectric project, or he was consulting on a hydroelectric project right here locally in Goshen. And some of the people he'd been working with, or I forget exactly how he had heard about it, but he heard about this cloud-based program called Onshape, and he's like, you should really look into this. It's affordable, and it's cloud-based. It's got all these unique benefits that you might want to look at. So that's what I did, and I found this program called Onshape. If you all have ever been on one of these Ramble streams before where I'm designing something, you're probably familiar with it. Really, in terms of the way that you use it, it's very similar to basically everything else. It's very intuitive. If you're familiar with any other CAD program, it's going to be very straightforward to you. Really, where it is unique is the fact that it does run in the cloud. So that means that you don't download a program. You open up your browser window, click the address, log into your account, and what you see is you have all of your files, all are stored there, that you don't ever save anything. And you can share things like it's kind of like Google Drive. It's just super, super simple. And the other benefit of it is that it's free. So you can have access to all the design capabilities of Onshape with a free account. What you can't do is privately save your files. So obviously, if you're a company, you want to buy a seat to do that. But the benefit of that is that any of your vendors if you want to share something with them, say, okay, just set yourself up with an account, and then I can share it with you. And then anytime I make an update or a new revision, it automatically gets pushed to the vendor. So, for example, the people we work with this most on would be our laser cutter, because we're constantly making updates to our laser cut files. It's just saved so much time and effort. All we do is we do release formally a print to them, but they've already got access to the actual design file. They can download it. They can export it into whatever format they want for their laser cutting machines. Absolutely incredible. And then that's not even digging into some of the design release aspects of it. So you all have seen that, where being used to hand drafting, which we won't get into my love of hand drafting and how I feel like it actually does result in a better design. But for a modern manufacturing company, you just can't do it anymore. It's well, I won't say that, but it would be very, very hard, and we haven't figured out how to do it yet. This allows us to stay current, stay up to date, and streamline that whole process so that we can, as a small company, release updates, new designs, even a new model within 2 years. That's kind of extraordinary. So there's a lot of aspects of Onshape that are really helpful, but the cost was really big for us at this point. And I mean, I guess we probably would have figured out how to afford a seat of SolidWorks, but it would have been very, very, very challenging for us. And I don't think it has all the benefits that Onshape has. So, yeah. I've kind of gone into this a little bit, this slide already, but it's a good, powerful tool. We'll skip that one. And at this point, let me just make sure you got any questions here. How long did it take you to model it? Says Gary. I'm assuming there you're asking about when we modeled the 250 chassis, or the 50cc chassis. It didn't take that long. I mean, I basically gave it to Chris, our frame modeler. I wish I had some of those pictures, because Chris is hilarious. His deliverable was 4 photographs of him with like fancy clothes and the chassis holding and so he said, I modeled your frame. So we still have these pictures of this guy modeling our 50cc frame around the shop, but the actual deliverable was an amazing model that I think he completed it in about a month. It didn't take that long, because basically from when we noticed the issue in October to completing most of the recalls was maybe in the new year of the next year. So we did it within a couple of months. It was I'm still proud of how we handled that. Great transition though. when we moved to the 450, we decided that we knew that this was going to be a bike that we needed to model from scratch in 3D CAD. So I guess just to backtrack a little bit, the 250, it had been a kind of combination, because you got to think, we started using Onshape. We would already design most of the 250 in terms of like design work, but so I still have many prints that go back to AutoCAD. Well, not many at this point. They're getting the number is diminishing, but there are still prints that date back to 2015 that we haven't updated. But basically, anytime we update one of those files, we bring it into Onshape. We do the full model and update it. So it's getting smaller and smaller. But the 250 was not the whole bike was not designed in 3D, and it still isn't. There's still we'll get to that part. It is now as of this year, but we knew that when we were going to do the 450, this bike, not only the entire motorcycle, but the tooling, the manufacturing tooling that would take to build it would all be designed in Onshape. And I'll quickly describe. I think I've gone over this before with you all why we do that, but there's obvious reasons that we wanted the whole bike in Onshape. You can see this is the model up here. On the right is the model, and that is the model that we designed the entire 450 off of. That is the 450, and then there's the finished, of course, product next to it. But obvious reasons for designing the whole thing in 3D. But the less obvious thing is why we would need to design the tooling in Onshape. We have a great video on that. If you YouTube Janus tooling or fixtures, I think it should come up. I should pull that up here. But if you pull up that video, it walks through how we worked with a guy named Adam Diaz down in Indianapolis. He built the first couple of the first two chassis, so 000 and H01 are both built by Adam, and he also built the initial tooling for us in 3D. And what that means is the significance of that is that when we built the 250, I kind of described, and even the 50, it was very rough. Like, here's my design. Even if I had a really accurate print, which I did for the 250, when we built it, we had no way of ensuring that the as-built product actually matched the model, if that makes sense. Because you can get as close as you can, but when you start bending tubes and they have 2 or more bends in them, it's very, very difficult to get to match a print. And so what you end up with is the finished product being like very, very similar to your design, your 3D design, or your prints, but not exactly the same. So anytime you go back to update it or to add a part or to add an upgrade, you can't actually use the model because you've always got to compare it with the physical example. So that really held us back in the 250, early 250 days, and even now with the 250, because we can't just go in the model, design the part to fit perfectly with the tolerances we want, prototype it, and have it work. It always takes let's build it, and then we'll tweak it to fit. That's basically the pattern. And you're always going to have prototypes, multiple prototypes, because you just need to be able to go through those kind of iterations with a design. But it would really drag out. And so the answer to that is if you design the tooling to make the first prototype in the same model that you designed the prototype or what you're designing, then everything has to fit. Or that's how you can control the fact that the as-built actually matches the model. And I can't overstate how important that is. And that really has allowed us now, when I go in, I just made an update to the exhaust system on the 450, and I could do it. I did it in the model, and the first prototype fit perfectly. It was great. So there's a lot of benefits to that, and it's really fun to have that. And there's a whole conversation we could have about hand drawing, hand drafting, and the design process that goes along with that. And then this whole idea, the modern idea is you basically have a virtual double for your real product. And I need to do some more thinking about the implications of that. That's happening in the architectural world, in the urban planning world, in all forms of design. They'll have this basically concept that the virtual version has everything that the real version has, and so they can control. It's a much tighter control loop, which I don't know. The true design, I think, has to leave room for the craftsmen to do their own thing, but this works pretty well for now, and our craftsmen have plenty of room to work around the tooling and the designs. So it hasn't really presented a major problem for us yet. But I just mentioned that because it's a really interesting place to think about design. So probably boring you all. Confed Yank says, "Aha! I am familiar to AutoCAD. This makes sense." Howard Spruitt, the 250 guys keep reporting rattles in the engine. What's that about? Huh? I don't know anything about rattles in the engine. Huh? Not that I'm aware of. If you hear noise, you could be valve train. But if you hear rattles in your motor, that's not a good sign. Give us a call. Let us know what's going on. Craig says, "Thank you, Richard, to your commitment to perfection. Many issues can happen. Nobody was hurt, and you all decided to correct the issue from one cracked frame, not as catastrophic as you think." Yeah, it was pretty catastrophic because we did realize that this would happen to every single one at about the same mileage. So if we hadn't addressed it, it would have been really bad. It's taken me a long time to be able to talk about this. I think this is the first time I've publicly addressed the fact that this happened. It was not only scary, but it was kind of embarrassing too, because this is the whole point of the frame, is that it holds everything together, and if it breaks, it's not a good look. So it's taken us a while to be able to talk about it, but I think it's important that we and I think it does, like you say there, Craig, it does speak to the fact that we stand behind what we're doing, and we worry about we take the safety of all of our customers really seriously. So yeah. Gary Smith says, "Hey, that is my Halcyon 450. Yes, you're right. It is actually, Gary. That's number 3. Good eye. I forgot that I used yours as the picture there. Confed Yank says, "Not boring. This reminds me of classes I've taken before where our instructor shown us videos about Harley Davidson, referring about architect, drafting, and engineering." Awesome. Well, let's get through. I'm almost done here. It's almost an hour in, too. So I won't bore you all too much with the competitive advantages of Onshape, but for us, it's allowed a small company to address a big problem like this in a really kind of competitive way, just like any other major manufacturer would do. It may have taken us a little longer than other manufacturers, and we still, as you all know, are very archaic in the way we do a lot of our production. But this allows us to work with a wide range of vendors. So we, as you all know, we have a lot of local Amish shops, which the benefit of being cloud-based doesn't really help with working with the Amish because they don't use the internet. So it's really funny that we design it in 3D CAD and then we print it off and then we fax it to the Amish. So it goes back in time, but we don't just work with the Amish. We work with local machine shops that use they'll use CAM, and they can actually take this 3D model and just put it directly into their or with a little bit of coding into their programs. We can cut CNC, like a prototype piece on our Bridgeport because it's 3D modeled, and we can work with vendors on the other side of the world that use advanced design software just as easily as we can anyone else. So it's it's pretty impressive what's available to us today as not only just as a small company, but just in general, the kind of design that you can do with this. You can really do amazing stuff. And the cool thing about Onshape is that it isn't this giant company like SolidWorks or something like that. It's a small company, and it doesn't necessarily, especially when we first got started, it didn't have all the features that some of the other programs had. But because it's cloud-based and because they have this really interesting dedication to feedback, they every month release new updates, and you don't have to download an update because you're logging into the browser. It's just like you already have it. So there's a little button that pops up that says, check out what the new updates are. And Charlie and our engineer, have learned to get really excited when that happens, because there's always something new that's really applicable to us. I will say that when we onboarded Charlie, our engineer, 2 years ago, almost 3 years ago, I think he was a little skeptical, shall we say, because he had been used to larger programs like SolidWorks, and I think we've had our frustrations with it. That doesn't have the full capability that some of the other programs do. But last fall, they launched a new update that has native, which means it runs in the same window that you're doing your design, simulation software. So that same FEA that we had to contract out back in the day with the 50cc frame now runs right in our design window with Onshape. So it's pretty powerful. We don't even have to export it to a different program to run FEA. We can do it now right in the design software. And we did that when Charlie ran his when he designed the pillion seat, the new passenger rack. He used the Onshape FEA to do that, and we were able to analyze it for strength that way, make sure that it's strong enough and it won't bend, etc. So let me just see what I'm saying here on traditional. Well, I guess I would just say that kind of like what I was saying a minute ago, we're not changing. We're still a very we address the design in a very traditional manner. I've always been interested in trying to kind of find that thread of connection with everything that's come before us, while simultaneously pushing forward, looking to the future, just like our the old two-faced Roman god Janus. And Onshape has allowed us to function as a really small company, building things in a very traditional manner in the modern world, with a wide network of vendors that expect that we have to function like any other company today, and we have to make sure that our products are safe and that they won't break, etc. Last thing I'll say, which is a little side note, is that, and this is also kind of embarrassing, because not embarrassing, it was kind of cool, but right after this frame failure happened, I was thinking, because we based the chassis on the Norton featherbed frame, and I thought, well, the first Norton featherbeds had no gusset, so that gusset that caused the problem, which is a gusset is a little extra piece of support that you add to add rigidity, and that's what caused that stress riser. The first racing Norton featherbed frames, the Manxes that raced at the Isle of Man, had no gusset at all, and I think it was just because they were racing for such a short period of time, they weren't worried about it breaking. But when they moved, well, I just started doing some research, and I found this book by this guy, Ken Sprayson. Highly recommended if you're interested in motorcycle engineering and history. Ken Sprayson is the man who took the featherbed frame design from Rex McCandless, the inventor, and turned it into the production chassis that Norton would use for many years. And he details in this book, they had the same thing happen. Early on, the frames all cracked at the same spot, and they fixed it exactly the same way we did. and I didn't learn this until after the fact, which I thought was absolutely hilarious and kind of interesting too. I do recommend this book. Ken Sprayson. It's called The Frame Man, and Ken was famous for, he would show up at the Isle of Man. So look, this flag above me, this is the Isle of Man flag. Ken Sprayson was famous for showing up at the Isle of Man and doing this. He would, let's see if I can show you the picture. He would weld everybody's chassis back up. So people would break their frames at the race, and he would weld them back together. And he offered that as a service out of a shipping container. And he tells all kinds of crazy stories about designing that chassis. Oh, look at this! Huh. This is the cardboard template for the gusset fix we did. So we ended up, yeah, we used a lot of cardboard to make the first versions of things. So we're still pretty traditional. But anyway, highly recommend this book, Ken Sprayson. And we basically recreated Norton's mistake 60 years later and fixed it the same way they did. So, well, there you go. That's the end of the presentation. I hope you found that interesting. That was actually a half-hour presentation that I gave in over an hour now. So I kind of rambled. If you have any questions, send them over now. I'm going to hang out for a little bit, drink the rest of my water, and see what folks are saying. So is Onshape open use? I'd like to play around with it for a book rack for the spring pillion seat placement. Yes, it is. Just sign up for a account, and you have access to all kinds of anyone else who's using the free version saves their file on. I think it's called the. Let's open it up. Where did I put my browser? There it is. Here it is. We go to Onshape. Oops, this is getting kind of. There we go. So this is our company, all the company design files. You want to see something cool? This is Charlie's been working on. This is the new tooling that we've been working on for quite some time, which will help us. We call it smooshing. It's a very technical term, smooshing. We smoosh the portions of the rear transom to allow for chain clearance. And this is we have an old tool that did it in several steps. This does it in a single press, and it'll be a much cleaner press. It'll be faster. It'll be easier to set up and break down. We're really excited about it. Not only are we able to machine all this now on our Bridgeport, but Charlie has set us up with a little kiln in the back, and so we're heat treating all of our own tooling as well. Really, really cool. I can't wait to we're gonna be accelerating the pace of our developments with this as we go forward. Anyway, Janus motorcycles there, but if you go in here, public, see this little globe icon? These are designs that, like La Pavoni espresso machine. Somebody has been here working on this, and you can see all the different parts of this awesome espresso machine. There it is. Look at that. And you can interact with this thing. You can select parts, and you can design your own stuff. And see right here, this little button, make a copy. You could make a copy of that and start designing your own parts to it. It's really, really cool. I've used it to design bookshelves in my living room. I designed my chicken coop in Onshape. Yeah, give it a shot. Check it out. It's really cool. All right, let's see. Confed Yank says also you may want to check FB messages. Okay, I don't ever get on Facebook, but I probably should. We'll take a look and see what's going on. Those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Yes, exactly. G-Man Dan, hi Howard. I'm guessing they're hearing the valves, which can sound like a buzz at certain RPMs. All engines with similar valve setups will have the same noise. I feel like Howard knows what valves sound like, though. Howard's been around the block. Well, let us know. Let me know what you're talking about. Gary says, that's why it's called a Ramblestream. Yes. I just did a sign up, and there are great training courses available. Yes, the training is great. Yeah, I'm going to sound like a total fanboy, but that was another thing that was really nice, is that the online training was really helpful. Confetti Yank says, are y'all working on expanding production? Yes, we are. We are looking at, we've had a slow spring, and we've had a really hot, fast last 2 weeks. We've sold a ton of bikes. I think we've sold 8 bikes in the last 2 days. Yeah, it's been wild. We are working on it. It's a long process because we have to get all the parts in to be able to scale up. So that means some of those long lead time parts, you can't just turn the switch from 5 bikes to 8 bikes a week overnight. It takes a lot of time. But yes, we are working on getting all the different moving parts in place to be able to scale up and move faster. But I will say one of the big things we're working on right now is upgrades and options. If you have ideas, I know that everybody wants it. I know Gary's on here, wants a center stand. We are working on it, and we're also working on our ability to come out with these upgrades faster. We know it's been a weakness of ours. We cannot come out with these fast enough because we're constantly putting out, we're putting out our own fires in terms of like, oh, we need to upgrade this piece of tooling for production. Charlie just has been working on, like, as you can see, that piece of production tooling, streamlining our own production. But we'd love to get to the point where we can come out with new upgrades and options. Is there a possibility to get brass pieces for Janus? I don't know. Like replace some parts with brass, maybe? I don't know. We have talked about like making fuel caps out of brass. That'd be kind of cool. Or handlebar clamps. Making an upgrade option. Wouldn't be hard. Well, it's 8:07. It's been tool bag for the 450. Yes, it's on the list. And I know, Gary, we've been telling you these things for years, but we really are working on our ability to come out with these faster. We've got some cool things up our sleeves. Is that espresso machine available for the 450? That'd be cool. Yeah, why have I got the espresso machine up here on the screen? Let's look at something cool. Anyway, any other questions? Do let me know. Send me an email. My email is richard@janusmotorcycles.com. I love hearing from owners or people who are interested in the bikes. Please send me a message, and I promise to get back to you. I always, as I say, look forward to hearing from everybody. Here's the device that holds the tooling. You can see it slides up and down, and we can interchange different pieces of tooling into this. This is the Fishmouth tool. So the back of your 450, the transom, actually on your 250, where the rear droplets are, the tubes get smooshed in to make a nice transition into that. New option, espresso or keg carrier. Yes, absolutely. Thanks for the entertaining rambling. Yes, thank you all for rambling along with me. This one's been extra rambling. I'm going to go back and throw some steaks on the grill. It's been great hanging out with y'all. If you have any more questions, keep posting them up. I'll try and I really am looking for. I'm really, first of all, happy that this has worked. The internet is working. I'm hardwired in. I think we may be moving this to Monday nights, just because Sundays are so busy. Especially, they weren't as busy during the winter when we started this, but now that it's summer almost, it's just hard to get out this time. So I'm thinking maybe Monday nights would be a better time. Let me know in the comments what you think. And the other thing I want to start saying is, and I know this sounds corny and everybody always says it, but hit like on this video, subscribe if you're not. It will help us reach more people. So the more people that hit a like on here, it really does help as we try and spread the rambling message. So if you enjoyed this, please consider doing that. Thank you all very much, and I will see you all possibly next Monday. So long. Bye-bye.